Hello, welcome. Long time, no fucking see. Hopefully I will be back and making more content. I just never want to make content that feels labored, so that's why I don't kind of force myself to make content. That's why it's been so few and far between. But I do feel, obviously, a little bit more of a boost of energy to make more of these videos. But if I'm like out of breath, like what did I do? I literally walked upstairs. We have stairs in this home now. I've never had stairs and they really tire me out. And whenever I go down them, I really feel like I'm gonna fall down them. But that's not the point. I'm gonna lose my train of thought every goddamn fucking second of this video because of the fact that I feel like I'm kind of on a new step of my journey with things, especially my diagnosis. I wanted to do a video that's more like composed about getting an autism diagnosis. And this one is particularly about accepting, loving, and most importantly, embracing your new autism diagnosis. It doesn't have to necessarily be for people who just got one, but it's going to mostly pertain to that because I think that's when we go through our most extreme kind of like, what the fuck is this? What am I doing? Who am I? Am I garbage now? You know, kind of like thing. I kind of want to make a video that's kind of like talking to my younger self when I first got diagnosed, or just like, not literally me. This isn't like, I'm not trying to be like a diary, like to me thing, but I'm just saying like people at my position, like people who just got a fresh diagnosis, speaking from somebody who has had one for, it's now been a little over 3 years, which is crazy to me. And that may not sound like a long time to people who had like a diagnosis when they were like 3, 5, 9 or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But to me, that's long as shit. Like, holy fuck, 3 years? That's crazy. It feels like I just got it in some ways, you know? Like, time goes by so fast. I'm so old. Anyways, I'm sure like ask me in another 3 years and I would have completely different things to say and be like, this Shayna had no idea what she was talking about or doing. But that's the fun of YouTube. You document your progress and people relate to it. So that's what YouTube is. Now that we've done that, let's move into the video. Oh, actually, I'm so sorry. I lied. I'm not going to move into the video. I have to do some self-promoting first. So I've got some stuff in the down bar. I have a... What do I do? I have a TikTok, that's new for me. I have an astrology TikTok. I have a Depop shop, which is like buy my old clothes. And I have an Instagram, which is like pointless. And they're all under Runaway Germ if you're interested. They'll all be down below. And then I also do an astrology channel with Nina, and that's called Party Trick Astrology. That'll be linked down below. And the other thing that I want to add to the down bar, what's funny is, okay, so this is a tangent, but this whole video is a tangent. That's all these videos are. That's all videos are, it's a fucking tangent. So we're gonna go off on one. So last March, I was involved with 2 different videos within the span of a week about autism. One of them is a JUBILEE video, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen, if not come from. I'll link that down below, but something else that I did that I recently found is this Autism Roundtable that I did with somebody named the Author Incubator and like a few other people. And that actually has like 4 parts to it and they're all uploaded. I'll link like one of the parts or all the parts or something down below. I think that they're really good and interesting and they haven't, I feel like, gotten the circulation that they deserve. So I just really wanted to promote that because I really enjoyed doing it. And it was just a really nice experience getting to meet those people and talk to them about autism. And so I'm sure if you probably enjoyed this video, you'll honestly like those. A little more professional, you know? I don't have my pink hair at the time. I'm not as fun. I'm not as spunky. Anyways, let's just get into the fucking video. This, again, is accepting, loving, and then most importantly, embracing your autism diagnosis, your new autism diagnosis. And this might not be true with everybody, but I have found that when I say in these videos, like, this might not be true with everyone, those are always the thing that I get the most comments about that are like, no way, I didn't think anybody else experienced this. So we're saying this stuff as though it's legit, right? I know that I experienced when I was first looking into autism and when I got my diagnosis, I was the only autistic person that I knew. Or had ever heard of. Like, of course, like, we are all around us, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many people on the spectrum, and there's so many people that haven't been diagnosed, they don't know themselves, maybe they just don't share it with you, maybe you just don't know because you don't know, you know? So of course, like, there were people on the spectrum around me that I was interacting with, but there was nobody that I knew that got a legitimate autism diagnosis and that I was informed of. In that experience, you're kind of the only person with the label, and as as we know, the label of autism carries a lot more weight than it should. Labels just in general carry a lot more weight than they probably should. But it is true, like, even though it's just a word, getting that term for it is huge. Like, honestly, it's huge. Like, it changed my life. It changed my perspective on things. Like, that is a huge experience. So that was something for me that was really confusing and daunting, because you already feel alone and isolated as somebody on the spectrum, that adding that extra layer of, like, now you're the only person that you know with this title, it feels even more isolating. It feels even more like you're just a fucking weirdo. What's weird though, honestly, is that since I've kind of like realized that I am on the spectrum, I now see so many people that I know on the spectrum, or like I'm able to spot it. So I know, I'm like, wow, I didn't realize, you know. It is kind of odd. I feel like once you kind of step into the world of autism, you really do realize how big it is and how all around you it is. And I know that sounds really weird, like the way to phrase this. Don't be afraid of stepping into, like, if you don't know anybody on the spectrum, don't be afraid of stepping into the community. Like, what really saved me and what helped me so much was like looking online, and like, if you're on this video, you're probably doing that. Like, keep doing that. Keep looking for more people that make content about autism. Number one thing that I would say though is probably avoid anything that's like, what's it called? Like shot, like professionally shot, like a movie or TV show about somebody on the spectrum, because it's probably not gonna be the most accurate and like nice depiction of somebody on the spectrum. So stay away from that. But like looking into content of people that are making content about autism and they have autism, I think is something that's really going to help you in getting into this world, getting into the step, and finding more people that, it's shallow, but finding more people that look like you. Like, if you're a female, finding more females is huge. If you're somebody of color, somebody of a different race, ethnicities, finding somebody on the spectrum of your same race or ethnicity is going to be huge for your experience too, because it's like, just like we only see fucking guys portrayed as people on the spectrum, we also only see white people portrayed as people on the spectrum. Like, and if they do ever bring a girl, the girl is always white. Like, and the only time we ever see them bringing girls is in like documentaries and stuff, but they're always white, and that's just not the actual case. And the more you look online, the more you'll realize that that's not the fucking case. I mean, there's that whole thing about, you know, people not being diagnosed correctly and blah, blah, blah. So mostly they are white guys, but that's not because that's the actual amount of people. But I'm going off on a side thing. Also, when you first get the diagnosis, it can be very, very overwhelming, and it can feel like a negative thing, especially like if you get it later on in life, because you're more aware of the world and society. I feel like now whenever anybody says society, you just feel like Jared Leto in that advertisement where he's like the Joker and he's like, we live in a society. Like, I feel like that word is like banned now, or it should be. You also will probably start to feel pretty embarrassed, maybe a little bit ashamed. If it's not just about the fact that you have autism, if you don't have like a huge stigma on the term, which I honestly didn't have a huge stigma on the actual term itself, because like I said, I didn't know any fucking buddy, so I didn't hear any bad things about it. You know what I mean? I had nothing really attached to it. You'll start to feel embarrassed, and like not just embarrassed because of the word, but embarrassed because of like things you've done in the past. Like just going back on like all those terrible memories that like you probably had and like you stored away and tried to forget and like pretend it didn't exist. Like they're gonna all start coming back up, and you may even try to obsessively start searching for them in your brain, and it's not fun. And when they do, you're just gonna kind of facepalm over and over again, because you're like, ugh, my fucking dumbass did that because I'm autistic, and then I did that because I'm autistic, and then I did that stupid fucking thing because I'm autistic, and just kind of also playing the blame game too, you know, putting everything bad that you've ever done, that's stupid, that's this and that, kind of putting it on the term autism. And so like, even though I did not have a negative view of it at first, there was a point where I definitely gained one, because I had put all the dumb stuff that I had done in the past on that word autism, and then I kind of gave it a bad connotation. So you can really be influenced by a lot of things, external and internal, that will make you feel embarrassed, that will make you feel ashamed. Something else that you'll probably go through, which I have a whole video on, which was like one of my biggest hurdles to get over, was mourning, for lack of a better term, your past life before you got your diagnosis. That's something that like I think I mentioned in the video, the only thing that I think will heal that is time, is just giving yourself time. And within time, I think also you kind of wind up like, here's you and here's your autism. And at first you see them as like these two things running side by side, and you're like, yes, me and my autism, and like it's, yeah, I'm like all one and the same. And even though you say that, they'll still feel like there's a distinguish because you spent so much of your life not knowing. But with time, those things really merge because you become one with your diagnosis. It doesn't become such a weird and new thing anymore. And so because of that, you actually do start to kind of merge and kind of lose track of what is your autism and what is you, because they are the same thing and they're ever flowing. And so when that happens, I think is when you stop mourning your kind of like lost childhood or lost life. You know, some people get diagnosed way later than I did. Now instead, when I look back at those things, because I'm gonna be honest for a second, okay? This is kind of going off on a tangent, but like, listen, I have a lot of regrets in my life. And I know that we're not really allowed to say that, like, for whatever reason, we're kind of always told, like, you can't have regrets, like, no regrets, it's unhealthy, you can't regret anything because you can't go back. Like, listen, yes, I agree. I totally agree, but that doesn't mean that I don't have a lot. I do. I have a lot of things that if I could go back in time, I would fucking tell myself to do the different thing. 100%, without a doubt. I don't care how that shit affects Butterfly or whatever it is. I'll change this world. I don't give a shit. It doesn't look very good right now, does it? Maybe we need a little change, okay? When I look back at those regrets and those things that I 100% wish I would change, I used to do that thing where I said it would be like, oh, it's because of my autism, it's because of autism, it's because of autism, right? But now I'm just kind of like, ugh, it's because Shayna. It's because of Shayna. It's because Shayna's a big fat dumb idiot. It's because Shayna's dumb. It's because Shayna's dumb. You know, and I know that's still negative, but that's something that I've always done. As much as it sounds bad, it's actually really nice to not be focusing so much on this external thing and instead just seeing myself as one of the same. I would much rather be like, oh, that's because of Shayna, than be like, oh, that's because of autism. Because the second that I don't like autism, I don't like myself. And like, I know that sounds odd, and I know that I'm hating on myself when I say that stuff, but it's like, I can still love myself enough things that I want to change and blah, 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 blah. But when the times that I hated autism, the times that I hated this idea of being autistic was when I was dealing with my most trouble during that first like second year or so of getting the diagnosis. Like, that's when I was having the most trouble, was when I was solely focusing on this one thing. So that's just something that came with time. That's something that probably can only come with time. So you just gotta be patient with that one. And I'm gonna be saying that a lot. You just gotta fucking be patient. And I'm not patient. I understand. Something else that might happen when you first get your diagnosis is that you'll probably become more introverted and even more wanting to self-isolate. And as with people on the spectrum, that's just kind of like how we're gonna be normally. So adding that extra layer of like, now we have this new diagnosis that we're super self-conscious about, and like analyzing every single little thing that we do to be like, oh, is this it? Is this it? Is this autism? Is this autism? Like, now I'm being like hyper focused on like, is this autism? Is this autism that I'm doing? And I'm already like having trouble like understanding, you know, the other person, their social cues. So because of that, I just wound up turning like even more isolated, even more introverted. Like, I really don't want to see anybody. And you know, then it also comes the thing of like, oh, then you have to tell people, and it's like this whole thing. And do I want to tell people? Do I want to not? And then do I make a big deal out of it, or do I not? But it is a big deal to me, but I don't want to, how do we approach it? I don't want to hear any dumb comments, because you always get dumb comments whenever you tell anybody. So because of that, you'll probably, like I said, just isolate yourself even more. And that's something that I think that if you are that way, you just should do it. You just should do it. And because you need to get past all those dumb things and all those super hyper self-conscious things that are now added into your head, because if you don't, you'll never get through it. You need to give yourself that time and honor that, and just get back to your normal self-consciousness. You know, we really don't want any more. You know, we don't need any more. And especially with isolation, like, come on. I don't know if I can say this, but it's you know, we wear the masks. It's even more normal to isolate and turn introverted. So I feel like now, if you're having that trouble, like, take this fact that if you're like unemployed, or if you're just spending more time at home, to Give yourself that time that you need. And within that, you need to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with the right people that, and you know, during COVID, we've lost a lot of relationships, I'm sure everyone has, to various degrees of things. And so you just need to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with the correct people. And now this next thing that I'm going to say is kind of like a general thing, but I think it's even more specific and more pertinent to people with autism. And especially when you're coming across your new diagnosis, and you probably want to live a life that's more catered to your diagnosis in the sense of like, you know, acknowledging it, validating it, and so therefore taking more time out to give yourself whatever you need, you know, it just becomes, you know, become a little bit more demanding. That's honestly what happens when you're, you know, when you really accept and own your diagnosis, is you become more fucking demanding of other people in a certain way, because you now are going to say these troubles that you're having on an external level that you've been dealing with internally for so long. So now they have to acknowledge it, and they need to cater a part of themselves to that. And so within that, you need to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with the right people. And in that, you also need to make sure that you're the right people for the people that you're around, if that makes sense. Like, it goes both ways. Like, I feel like we as a society like to peg people as, this person is 100% toxic. They're toxic for you, they're toxic for you, they're toxic for you. And that's the case for some real shitbags. But I think that there's also a lot of people that we're talking about that are 100% toxic are just 100% toxic to you. And you are 100% toxic to them, you know? So like, I wouldn't consider myself a toxic person, but I totally can be if I'm being put around the wrong person for me, you know? And I'm not saying they're the wrong person. I'm just saying like the wrong person for me. That's what I'm saying. It's like we need to take everything more as an individual. You may need to cut off people that you're with because you know they won't treat and respect you correctly, but you also may need to cut off some relationships because you know you cannot give them what they want. You cannot give them what they need. There are people that draw up toxic things in us that we aren't normally a toxic person. You know, aspects to Pluto and synastry that you may not have natally. And I think that with autism it's even more pertinent because we need to be treated a certain way, and we treat people a certain way too. You just need to make sure that the people that you're around are able to cater to you and you're able to cater to them, and be honest and take a look at things. And within what I'm saying, a huge thing that kind of sums that up is, just like you do not have to like every trait that a neurotypical has, a neurotypical does not have to like every autistic trait you have. And I think that's a big thing that people like to misunderstand about, is that like when we say we want autism acceptance, we then need every neurotypical to like everybody with autism. And that's not the case. That's not what we're saying. You still can recognize that everybody's an individual under there. Okay, be patient. I keep saying that, but be patient. And I will say that the way that you handle loving yourself after autism and embracing it and stuff like that is going to really mimic how you've had to accept other flaws of yours in your life in the past. And I completely will say that I do not think autism is a flaw. But if you're watching this video, you probably are low-key feeling that way a little bit and having trouble with it. Okay, like let's say like body hair is a good example. Like it took me a long time to accept that I'm a hairy gal. That I saw as a flaw, but now I just see as something that is. It's not good, it's not bad, it just is, right? So I used to think of it as a flaw, and the way that I went about handling that and how long it took, how, you know, how much I had to concentrate on it, how much I had to work on it, what I had to do, the steps I had to take, it's going to be very similar and going to very much mimic how you learn to love your autism. So it becomes not something that's a flaw, but just something that is. And I know that might be obvious, but I guess something as like big and complicated as something neurological can feel so much bigger than just like something silly and trivial like body hair, but our brains kind of respond and will kind of treat it in a similar way. This is a weird little note, but since I was kind of touching on relationships and people a second ago, a little warning that I have is just to be cautious if you decide to make the fact that you're autistic public and you are somebody who got a little bit of a later diagnosis. There might be people that come back into your life for a second that all of a sudden are all understanding, all of a sudden are all like, oh, this or that, or like, oh, blah, 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 or like, oh, this is so great, this is so brave, or whatever dumb thing it is that they say. Just be cautious of those messages, because if this is coming from somebody that you might have had some trouble with in the past, there can be people who put on that fake face, like almost like a weird sympathy, pity face, because maybe they feel bad for a second and then they'll reach out to you in a very fake, gross way. Like, I thought I was forgiven by some people, or I thought whatever it was we were past, and then I'll find out months or years later that that's absolutely not the case, and they were just kind of like, I can't think of what the term is. They're just like being condescending, pitying me, just kind of maybe even like trying to cash in some weird like disabled clout, which I know sounds disgusting, but that's because it fucking is. I know that I was kind of like, oh, this is so great, so many people are more accepting, and then I'm like, oh no, they're not, they're even worse than I thought they were. So just be wary. And I'm not saying that everybody is doing this. Everybody that did that, like, what I had my suspicion of at first, and I was right. Everybody that wasn't doing that, still cool, still great. I was right. They're fine. I didn't get any weird suspicions. So probably trust your nose on that. Something else that I think is way more important, that I may even do a whole other video stressing this subject, because it is something that I feel so strongly about, obviously because I'm very public about my autism, is that you should tell people. And I think that that is a huge thing in a step towards loving, accepting, and embracing your autism, is that if you're hiding it, and I know you're thinking like, not telling people isn't hiding it, I just don't feel like it, this and that, no. After a certain point, that's fucking hiding it. Obviously, I'm not saying you have to fucking wear a sign around your neck that says like autism, or you have to fucking put a puzzle piece like it's a goddamn Star of David and you're in the Holocaust. I'm obviously not saying you should fucking tell everyone and that everybody needs to know that's in your life, but the people that are close to you, that you see frequently enough, you should tell. And I understand that with work, things get a little bit more complicated, but I'm saying interpersonal, like one-on-one, more personal, family, even relationships, you need to tell them, you know? And you know the people that you should tell. And if you're not, then you can never then accept, love, or embrace your autism, because you're not being honest with yourself. You're not fully coming face to face with it. I feel like you need to get it out in the open sometimes just for yourself. And so I feel like telling people really is more of an act for yourself than the other person. And it should be. It's your thing, you know? Obviously, you should only tell people when you're ready, but there gets to be a certain point that you're now just withholding information. Another thing, this is kind of like a side note, but like also when you tell people, expect them maybe not to care as much as you think they do. Like, I know that I thought when I told people it would be a huge thing, and that is true with like parents and family maybe, but with friends, I don't think it's going to be as much that way. At least that's what I found. Maybe people are experiencing something completely different and like they tell people and they're like, whoa, it's great. That's kind of how I thought people would respond, but I found people were just like, oh, okay. And then like it was never mentioned again. And it was almost to the point where I felt like it was a little rude sometimes, because like I found people like didn't really care to ask any more questions, didn't really care to talk about it. And that was another thing that I had trouble with, like, wow, I care about this so much, but nobody else really seems to, or like, do people not really care about me, and blah, blah, blah. And that is most of the reason why I made this channel, honestly, is because I cared about me enough to want to talk about it. Looking back on those times, like, I held a lot of resentment or whatever it may be towards those people, but I don't think that it's a negative thing. I don't think they were trying to do it in a negative way. That's their way of accepting it, and maybe like we're taught kind of just to be like, oh, that's cool, and then like keep going. Like, that's kind of like what we're taught is the way to respond to people like that stuff. And sometimes like that's not what you want. Like, as a person on the spectrum, like that's not always what I wanted, but they're not trying to do anything that's wrong. They're just trying to do what they think is right and what they think is best and what they think you want. But you know, not everybody's a Lilith and Leo like me and don't want to like talk about themselves as much. And another thing is, like, once you tell people, make sure that that's not the end of it. You need to be vocal about your needs going forward, and you need to keep reminding people and keep bothering them about it. And I know that's like, oh, that's annoying, I don't want to be annoying, da 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 da. But if you aren't annoying, then it's not going to happen. You teach people how to treat you, and this is 100% the case with this stuff. So you have to not just tell them once, but kind of keep reminding them and keep teaching them about it, you know? Closed mouths don't get fed. If you are somebody who's having a lot of trouble with the label of it, to me, at least, I experienced like the label or the strength that it once held really does fade away over time. And it really does, like I mentioned, it really does feel like there's more of a merging with those two things. I'm so sorry. I keep on jumping between points and going back and forth, but we're gonna go back and forth a little bit more. I mentioned about you need to find the online community. You need to be comfortable putting yourself into the internet. Confession here, something I did a lot when I first got my diagnosis was that I would go and I would basically like search for hateful things that people have said about people on the spectrum, specifically like parents or people in a relationship. Like I would just try and find kind of like the nastiest, meanest things that people would say or the stories they would tell and this or that, and like I had a whole folder of that. And I know that sounds like really weird and not like the best thing to do, but it did feel like I needed to scratch this weird itch of it. But it was almost also possibly like a need to cleanse all that stuff, like a need to hear it all so that I could take it all in and like dump it out again basically. But just make sure if you're doing that stuff, like know your limits. Like I'm gonna tell you right now, there's a lot of really, really mean, ignorant shit out there. Just like crazy things that like people don't even realize sometimes is offensive, or just like talking about people on the spectrum like they aren't human beings with brains, like they're just like vegetables or something. It's pretty crazy. So just be nice to yourself on the internet about it, because that can definitely fuel even more of a spiral, even more of some hatred. And people will not only say stuff online, but people will also say really, really fucking shocking, really, really ignorant things to you in person too. And they will upset you, and that's okay. You can let them upset them, you can let them hurt you, but just do not let it circulate in your head. And I know that's like not something that you have control over, but you need to throw that stuff away. You need to hear it and then dump it out and try and forget about it. Things definitely circulate in my brain and like replay in my brain over and over again. Like just like, you know, a line to a song can, so can this hateful comment obsessively go over and over in their tone. So you just really need to clear yourself of that. I don't really know how. You just have to keep your mind distracted, I guess. My only advice to that is smoking weed definitely helps me get rid of that. But I don't know if that's something that I'm allowed to advise to over the internet. So you are absolutely not as alone as you think you are. I went on a whole spiel earlier in the video about how autism is all around us, and I have definitely learned that through putting my experiences on social media, on this YouTube channel, even through that Jubilee video was huge. Like I now honestly get DMs really frequently from somebody on the spectrum that has related so much to a video or my videos, and they will tell me their experience, and it's insane how, looking back on it, the time in my life when I felt my absolute most unrelatable was actually the time that I was going through something that so many people experience. It's just been crazy to learn. And so I think that it's important to not be afraid to put your experiences out there. I'm not saying that everybody has to make a video. Even going on Reddit anonymously and just like adding to the conversation in different forms or something like that will make it feel so much more relatable. And it's just crazy, some of the comments. Like I really appreciate all of them. I hope you guys know. And that's a side note. I'm really bad at getting back to DMs and comments and responses. But please know that I read every single one of them and I appreciate every single one of them. I just get really scared about responding, and then I get like really self-conscious because I'm like, oh, I can't just respond to this one because I didn't respond to those other people, and then that's gonna make me look really mean, and like that's not gonna be good, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm just like, oh, what do I say? Nothing I say will be good. And like I'm just like, oh my god, some of your guys' DMs to me are so nice and so well written and so open and vulnerable, and I'm just like, how do I respond? Like, how do I get to your level? I'll never be on your level. Like, that's awesome. It's like, it's self-conscious. Anyways, a huge thing about accepting your autism is that knowing in your head that it is not a negative thing. And I know I've said this a lot and maybe beat you over the head in it, but it does not have any sort of positive or negative connotation. It is very neutral in itself. Of course, you know, you can pick apart each trait and put them in a good or bad, black or white category, but just know in your head, in the whole realm of things, autism just is. It's deep, man. Sometimes I think that the fact that we as autistic people have a lot of trouble getting really close to people also inhibits us on seeing that we are actually very good at a lot of things that many neurotypicals struggle with. But because we don't get super intimate or super close with neurotypical people or just people in general, we'll never fully be able to see that. Because just remember, like, it becomes very clear, especially the more that you observe humans or people, that not all neurotypical traits are perfect and good and ideal, and not all autistic traits are bad. Everybody is a motherfucking flawed human being, okay? And just because you're with somebody with autism, that doesn't also automatically mean that you magically have more flaws than everybody else. That is absolutely not the case. You need to be proud of your differences. You need to be proud of your autism, because trust me, everybody is going to make it really, really hard on you. A lot of external things are going to be hard on you. So if you're not on your own team, nobody else is gonna be. This is something that I've been fortunate enough to be pretty good at naturally. And so I know this is something that may be like easier said than done, but it's something that you really need to work on, especially as somebody on the spectrum, and especially as somebody who displays their autism emblem with pride, okay? And I'm not talking about a puzzle piece like fucking Autism Speaks. We don't like Autism Speaks around here, okay? We've canceled them. It's all good. Differences are gonna make your life a lot harder. I'm not gonna lie. Every internal difference that you have will display itself externally, except because it's not something actually physical, like a handicap, you're probably not gonna get the help that you deserve or need. And so you have to be loud, you have to be vocal, you have to ask for things, you have to be a little bit of a bitch, and you have to keep people around you that love and accept you for the bitch that you are. Bitch is gender neutral, by the way. Also, on top of that, shit's hard. Being autistic, it's fucking hard. So don't make things harder on yourself by also just hating on your autistic traits, hating on this word autism, shunning it, condemning it, blah, blah, blah. Like, come on, things already suck as it is. You gotta get yourself on your own team. Like, I'm gonna keep saying it. The world is already hating on those autistic traits for you. You truly have to be your own advocate. Like, this is obviously true with everyone. You can say this with anyone. This is just general, like, I guess kind of shitty life advice, vague, but I think it is especially true for a crowd of people that are so introverted as people with autism, people on the spectrum. Like, it is especially true for us because we can't like fake it until we make it. We can't schmooze our way to things. We can't do this or that. Like, we just have a lot more daily things that we're dealing with or having to handle around, that I think it's just especially pertinent to us. Also, not many people know the ins and outs of autism, so that's why I keep saying, like, you need to be vocal, because people might not be doing that, not because of they're trying to or this or that, but just because they legitimately don't know. So you kind of, like I said, you have to be your own advocate. You have to kind of take a stand, take a position. Like, that's kind of why I started doing this channel in general, is because I was like, well, somebody's gotta do it. Also, accepting your autism is just really one step. Like, you can accept the diagnosis and you can come to terms with it and be like, okay, I am autistic, but you really need to go the extra step of not just loving it and being like, oh, I love this thing, sure, I'll love this thing, sure, I'll love this thing, but embracing it, being like, yes, this is the things that I'm good at. You have to fully embrace it, work with it, and love it, and give yourself the kindness that it deserves. You need to literally embrace it with such open arms that you don't realize it's there most of the time, because like I said, you have this new nice little perfect meshing of you and your autism. Another thing, like I mentioned, like I feel like autistic brains can really hyper focus on stuff. So you can hyper focus on this idea of autism, like I've been mentioning. Once you stop hyper focusing on your autism and you truly start embracing it, is when it becomes a part of you and you can reach your full potential. I think that there's so many more positive autistic traits than we realize. And again, a lot of that comes from the isolation factor of it, and just maybe it doesn't integrate the best into the way that society is now. But there are so many good things about it, and so many things that you can use for you instead of them being used against you. You just have to be nicer to yourself, acknowledge it, and put yourself only in the situations that will treat you with the respect that you deserve. I feel like, is there any advice in here? Did I say anything? Did I just blabber on in general about autism? Is this video helpful? I don't know. Now I'm getting self-conscious. But that's all I got for you. I guess we're done. That's the whole video. As always, I like to hear your experiences down below. I mentioned I promise I do read all the comments. I'm just really bad at responding, but I always appreciate them and I learned so much from them. Thank you guys so much for all of your support. Anybody that's ever commented, liked, or watched these videos, it really does mean a lot to me because they are so personal, so it's just very, very sweet. Again, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I'll be back pretty soon with another video. Put any requests that you have down below. And don't forget to check out the down bar with a bunch of other of my shit. So yeah, bye.